incident. And we did just check in again with police. White has not yet filed a report. On the story with us is CNN law enforcement analyst Matthew Horace. Good to have you with us because you can give us perspective, honestly, from two different points here, right? So there's your professional perspective as a former law enforcement officer, and then there's your personal perspective. When you look at what we know about the incident and what we're hearing from Roddy White, what's your reaction?
Well, I think we need to look at it from a broad circle. The first is when officers are walking up to vehicles, number one, he got stopped for doing 90 miles an hour. In some states, that's reckless driving. We develop our reasonable suspicion and probable cause based on what we see. And oftentimes, traffic violations lead to other bigger, more violent, more deadly issues. Not all the time, but sometimes. They give us a reason to pause. They cause the situation to get a little more tense than it otherwise might not be. And it's each individual officer's decision whether they want to walk up to the car with their hand on their gun, with their gun out, not touching their gun. You know, it all depends on the person and how they evaluate the threat.
Does it send a particular message if your hand is on your gun?
It should not send a particular message because officers are taught that traffic stops go bad very quickly. And the only way to stay up with the times and be ahead of the game is to be certain that you can grab that gun if you need it. And as you know, Erica, officers are killed every year in traffic stops. And we are taught that that's one of the most volatile situations that we deal with.
So when we reached out to the DeKalb County Police Department, one of the things that they told us, and I'm going to read this so that I don't get it wrong, is that they use what's called a level 3 holster. So that protects the officer from having the gun taken during a confrontation because it's 3 steps to unholster that weapon. And then they also said that there's nothing in the policy manual about a mention of hands on a weapon during a traffic stop. So put that whole level 3 holster and what we learned from the policy manual into, you know, sort of plain English for us.
Well, let's go back to history. Officers throughout history, unfortunately, have been killed with their own weapons. So the idea is to secure the weapon at a point where you can get it if you need it, but someone else can't grab it if they try to take it from you. So these types of holsters are used for several reasons. Now, with that, I've been stopped as an African-American man, as a police officer, and at different times officers have had their hands on their guns. And I've even been stopped when officers had their guns out. I've made traffic stops where my hand was on my gun or my gun was out. It all depends on the frame of mind of the officer, how he or she evaluates the stop, and what threats may be present.
There is such a conversation happening right now in this country. We heard Roddy White say, oh, he's one of those, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, you know, he's one of those officers. There are challenges in the communities that the officers protect. There are challenges within the police force.
Sure.
And we talk about it a lot more now. Are we having the right conversation?
I think the conversation has to change, and I think we have to change the dialogue to change the narrative. The narrative continues to come up over and over. As an African-American man, I understand the angst, the anxiety, and the tensions that comes with being stopped by police. I am nervous when I get stopped by the police. If I look at my rearview mirror and see an officer's hand on his gun, I am more nervous when that happens, and that's why I'm more conscious of my actions and my words. In this case, I don't know we can take the broad reach that this officer is just like the officer in Tulsa or the officer in North Charleston. He doesn't know, and we don't know. At the end of the day, he was stopped for doing 90 miles an hour. He had an expired registration. The officer had reasonable suspicion or probable cause to stop him, and he's unhappy about what he felt was unfair treatment.
Really appreciate your insight, Matthew Horace. You give us great perspective on a broad spectrum, as you pointed out. Nice to see you.
Have a great day.
You too.